Hello, Hopewell Valley Regional School District Campus Security Officers. Welcome to Implicit Bias Training by On the Mount. I'm your host and facilitator, Marlon Webb. For those of you who were with me for Module 1 Vantage Point, you probably noticed that we are doing things a little bit differently this time. So we're making use of our online collaboration tools in order to continue our discussion. And of course, we're doing that in light of the COVID-19 pandemic. Let me take this time to say I hope and pray that you and your loved ones are healthy and taking the proper precautions to stay safe. I can tell you for sure that I have come to a new understanding of many things in life, especially as we talk about Vantage Point, as I am now homeschooling with my children. And it's an awesome responsibility for me to understand my children and their educational needs and being their primary educator. I find that to be kind of similar to the struggles that I had when I first started understanding implicit bias and having to unpack things about myself. I've had to unpack things about my own learning styles and preferences to understand how I can teach my young people. And it kind of overlaps when I think about the change and having to look at parts of yourself that you don't regularly look at in order to be better and to serve the young people that are around us with the passion to really see them grow. So you may hear some of them running around as they are my production crew. Any of them are at Lincoln. Lincoln's over here. Don't know if you can see him, but he's okay. Arizona, you over there?
Yeah.
Yes, okay. Back to business. So I really enjoyed our time together during the first module, and I believe we shared valuable insight about our own bias and feelings as we tackled the subject of implicit bias. It was really important that we're able to be transparent. I believe, in addition, and I hope that you agree that we are respectful, we are engaged, and we are focused on the equity of the students we serve as we learn together. I am confident that we can carry the same commitment and enthusiasm into this portion, even online, while we spend this time together. This is the first part of our three-part module that encompasses our discussion on cultural competency. So during this time, I'd like to reflect on some of your responses about the content you connected with from the Padlet that was provided. I believe Dr. Treese provided that Padlet back in October 2019 and then has updated it and redistributed it a couple of weeks ago. So I believe that I received responses from you regarding your connection with that Padlet. During the next part of this module, after this one, I'll begin to present the basic mechanics of cultural competence. That presentation will lead us to our online collaboration later this week. At that time, we'll begin to engage in discussion and topics and scenarios that foster our growth in cultural competence and reflect our understanding of the importance of cultural competence in the way we serve. So at this point, let's get started. Thank you for taking the time to engage with that content. I really appreciate that. Your responses, I recognize that, sometimes when we have to take a closer look at ourselves and in light of things like implicit bias and understanding the way that we have come to understand things, that it's not always easy, but I appreciate your responses being respectful and transparent, especially transparent. And so I believe this is fertile ground and a good time for us to get started. I want to talk to you about some of the responses that you gave. So one of you responded regarding microaggressions that this is something that's very prevalent with middle school kids. And sometimes it's a subtle remark about gender, sexual preference, or race. And one of you also mentioned that there was a subtle remark that was made that offended another student when there was a discussion about slavery in class, and how these subtle comments are damaging and hurtful, especially with the kids, when other kids are taking it in jest or they find it to be comical. I just want to let you know, my response to that is it's a step in the right direction for you to even be able to see that that kind of incident is going on and know that it's something where we have to intercede and we have to have the right tools to intercede, which is why we're trying to build cultural competence at this point. That allows us to be able to either reinforce a plan that we already have or implement a plan to put in place a positive change with those students. Another response that I got was about micro-validation. And what we had was, you said that you often find that we will find ourselves in a place where no matter how hard we try for our intentions to create and maintain an equitable learning community, someone finds fault in the presentation. And So these very incidents, I have to say, provide the necessary building block for our growth as professionals. Sometimes it's difficult. Sometimes it feels like nothing that you say might be right, but stay connected. Stay connected with the students. These students might have been the student who otherwise was just waiting for you to say something to mess up because of their level of cultural sensitivity. So stay engaged with them. Take the time at that point maybe to follow up and try to understand where it is that the child might have felt offended or culturally sensitive, or circle back with them at the right time to understand more about that. But we'll get to even more of that once we talk about actual strategies for implementing cultural competence. Another response was about microaggressions. And you said you can have two people from the same background and they can have two different perspectives on action. So asking a person for a different background from a different background than yours to teach you something about their name can be viewed as completely genuine and benign, or completely hurtful and offensive depending on the person. And this tracks back to Huda in her TED Talk talking to us about her name. And so you asked me, what do I think about this? Well, I can tell you that I agree. That's a difficult subject. It seems like a double-edged sword. Using the double-edged sword to divide that matter, I would say some students will engage when asked about their name and some won't. And there are many factors including culture, gender, setting, educational level, just to name a few, that may change the way that a student will respond to that type of question. Once again, it's not about the right answer, but more importantly, it's your behavior as a CSO reflecting cultural competence. In short, if the conversation goes wrong based on that question, are you willing to stay engaged? Or circle back when it's appropriate. Maybe you need to take some time to think it through before you actually re-engage with that student. It might not be exactly what you said, just their level of cultural sensitivity. But if they feel like their feelings were hurt, we need to acknowledge that, and we need to be able to try to engage and make sure that we're performing in the way we should. So thank you for that. Someone else responded regarding the meaning of a person's name. One of my favorite conversation starters is I use when I encounter someone with a less common name is, what does your name mean? Or are you named after a relative? And you told me that you've heard some amazing, beautiful stories and that open dialogue created to discuss their concerns and statements, and it really went a long way. I think that dialogue is invaluable, in part because you have an opportunity to learn more about the student, including whether the initial question is culturally appropriate, and so that matters. That matters, and it helps because you're creating that dialogue. And once again, if it doesn't seem to have connected, you can circle back. Another one of you said, connecting with the sameness or commonality stops us from connecting with others, and sometimes stops us from connecting with the realities. In our school district, we have a diverse population, but the majority of our students are Caucasian. If I had one question after watching this presentation, I would ask how the non-Caucasian students feel about their educational experience in this district. Well, that, sir, is an excellent question. The desire to know how that population of students feels about their educational environment is valuable, extremely valuable when you're seeking to create a foundation of cultural competence. It's really, we'll get into it a little bit later, but it's part of you taking a self-assessment in cultural competence. It's a significant part of our figurative temperature gauge for cultural climate. I've engaged with multiple students from the district, and they've been at the high school level, and regarding pretty much that same question. And I should give this caveat first. It was not an official study or survey, but I can tell you that the prevailing theme was with those high school students that they just sometimes wish that they had more of a voice. So that's something that we can also talk about when we get into our discussion time period. So I appreciate all of your responses, and I appreciate the transparency in your responses. I appreciate you being willing to engage with the content. I will see you soon. So there will be another video that you'll be watching where I'll kind of outline cultural competency for you, cultural competence. And that video will lead to what we're going to do when we all get together later this week through Google Meet and have a conversation discussion and go over some, like I mentioned earlier, some scenarios and some strategies. So we're looking at this from a practical standpoint. How do we practice the behavior that goes along with cultural competency, which helps us to eradicate some of the bias that we may have just just from who we are and what we've experienced in life. So once again, please stay safe. I look forward to talking with you soon. I look forward to interacting with you soon. And that's it for now. Thanks.